I'm going to show you how a good understanding of technique and mechanics will instantly make you a better drummer. Applying these techniques will prevent injury, increase fluidity, control, sound quality, and speed. Let's talk about the grip. When I grab the stick, I want my thumb to be parallel with it, as much skin contact as possible. My index finger is going to go directly across, usually around this first knuckle here, depending on your hand size. You can either wrap it around or let it hang out. We want to make sure that our thumb doesn't go too high, too low, or start to fall off the sides. Otherwise, we'll lose control. We also don't want to squeeze this. We want the stick to be able to move on its own with a little bit of input. When I put the rest of my fingers around the stick, same thing. Make sure you don't squeeze. Always relax. Make sure you have as much skin contact on the stick at all times. That's going to give you the fullest sound. We don't want our fingers to be all spaced apart or too tight together, and we don't want there to be a giant gap in between our hand and the stick. How do I tell if my grip is too tight or just right? There's a few ways. When you move your wrist around, the stick should move with it, but it should also have a little bit of leeway. Another way to tell is just by pulling the stick out of your hand. If it comes out easily with no resistance, you're probably good to go. If you pull your whole arm with it, probably squeezing too much. The sound that you make comes from your grip on the stick. If I squeeze the stick super tight, you hear this gross, really dead sound. But if I let the sticks breathe, you can actually hear the resonance of the wood. That's going to translate to the drum and give you a nice, warm, open sound. Now let's find the bounce point on the stick. Every stick has kind of a different bounce point. Gripping it from that spot will make it work for you in the best way that it can. We're just going to grab the stick with our index finger and thumb, put it on a drum or a pad, something bouncy. Be really relaxed in those two fingers and just let it bounce. If I move my fingers up even farther, now it bounces less. Let's move down farther. Now it's bouncing a bit more and it's starting to feel a little bit better in my hands. If I move back even more, now it's not bouncing quite as much, but it still feels pretty good. If I move back more, bounces a little bit. I can tell that it's heavy, starting to not feel good. On my sticks and most Vic Firth sticks, the bounce point's going to be around that American flag area. So that's where I build my grip. Every stick's going to vary a little bit, so experiment with moving up and down and see what works best for you. Wrist shape and general wrist health is important. We want to protect these tendons in our wrist to avoid carpal tunnel or tendonitis, anything like that. We want to avoid the extremes of movement in our wrist. There's a lot of leeway with how we move our wrist around. If we move it too far down or left or right, you'll notice that it can start to strain your tendons around your wrist area. Try to move your wrist all the way down and make a fist. That doesn't feel good. We don't want to be doing that while we're playing the drums. Same with if I go to the left all the way or the right all the way. So we want to keep our wrist as straight as we can to avoid any sort of injury like that. Now we'll quickly go through some of the grips that we'll use on the drums. First we'll do German. That's where our thumbs are facing each other, our wrists are nice and straight, backs of our hands are pointing at the ceiling. This utilizes a lot of wrist rotation, kind of like knocking on a door, and it has a lot of weight on top of the stick. If I move to my thumbs facing the ceiling, that's called French grip. French grip utilizes a different rotation, kind of like opening a door or shaking a hand, and it has less weight on top of the stick. In between those two, we have American grip, which uses a nice relaxed rotation in our wrist and has kind of a best of both worlds with weight on top of the stick. I'm talking about weight on top of the stick because it does affect our sound. If I'm playing French and move to German without changing anything in my hand, you'll be able to tell the difference. Even though the difference isn't that big, we want to think about the quality of our sound all the time. Fulcrums. Fulcrums are the main contact point on the stick that we use to achieve whatever we're trying to achieve. We're going to talk about 3 today. So first we'll start with the front fulcrum. Front fulcrum is your thumb and index finger. This is the least sturdy of the fulcrums, and I try to use it as little as possible, but there is a time and a place for it. Then we have middle fulcrum. So middle is the middle finger, or maybe the middle finger and the ring finger. And I try to use this one more than the front fulcrum for almost the same things. This utilizes the bounce in the same way the front fulcrum does, and it's just a little bit more sturdy. Then our back fulcrum is mostly our back 2 fingers, maybe back 3 fingers, in conjunction with our thumb. This one's the most sturdy, and we want to use it as much as we can. For all 3 of these fulcrums, my index finger will kind of relax on the stick. I don't wrap it around too much. But either way, all 3 of them serve a purpose on the drums for what we're trying to do. Mechanics and where to use these fulcrums. Our stick should always travel in a straight line path, up and down. We don't want it to scoop in from the sides or move in circles or anything like that. We're trying to utilize the rebound of the stick and the drum, and if we're moving in those ways, we're not going to get a good result. It can also damage our wrist. The beat of the stick is what moves our wrist. We don't want to think of our wrist moving the stick, but the stick moving our wrist. We want to work in tandem with the stick. When hitting the drum, we always want to rebound Even if we play at a low volume, we still want to rebound. Never stop the stick. Keep it moving all the time. Once you're done playing, obviously the stick can stop, but we still want to rebound when we're done, even if we're rebounding to a very low height. We don't want to ever end with our stick in the drum. That just doesn't sound good. Stroke types. So these are different than upstrokes, downstrokes, all that stuff. That's going to be for a different video. Right now we're going to just talk about wrist strokes, finger strokes, and then a little bit of arm strokes. So wrist strokes use the wrist mechanic to move the stick. What I mean by that is it's all our wrist moving up and down. When playing wrist strokes, we want to use the back fulcrum, use the stick's rebound to influence the movement of your wrist. Really good way of getting used to playing with back fulcrum wrist strokes is to do crab claws. This is where we break rules and we take our thumb off the stick and our index finger off the stick and make this kind of a pincher. When you're doing this, don't straighten your fingers out or tense them or anything. Just work on having a relaxed back three fingers and good contact in your hand with the stick. What you should be looking for with this is the stick rebounding, moving constantly, never stopping the movement with your wrist. You should also feel the stick vibrating in your hand, and you should hear the resonance of the stick as well. Finger strokes use our fingers in tandem with our wrists. So it's similar to a wrist stroke, except we're following the stick naturally with our fingers. Don't squeeze your hand and always keep your back fingers on the stick. Let your fingers follow the stick on the way up and use them as support on the way down. Avoid letting your stick fly out of your hand. If your fingers start leaving your stick, it can start traveling sideways like this. I see a lot of people play kind of like this. You have no control this way. Your only option is to really squeeze. So keep your fingers on the stick, keep it in one spot. Think of this as dribbling a ball upside down. We're moving the stick with our wrist and we're just following it with our fingers, letting it do what it wants to do. Let's talk about the arms. So our arms are connected to our shoulders, right? Shoulders can easily get tensed when we're not thinking about it. If your shoulders tend to creep up while you're playing, you might not even notice it. So always take deep breaths, breathe, and relax your shoulders. Try moving them up, back, and down. That's going to put you in a nice, really relaxed state with your shoulders. And then, make sure you're breathing. We also don't want to tense up our elbow. What I mean by that, our elbow should be naturally by our body or wherever it needs to be to support our arm. We don't want to pop our elbow up like this and start playing really, really high up. That's not good for us. It doesn't help us at all. One thing we'll talk about using our arm today is utilizing a whip stroke. This is similar, but a little bit different to push-pull or molar. It creates power and momentum that can be harnessed for finesse or for playing faster notes. We're going to lift our arm up naturally from our elbow, relaxing our hand, and on the way up we prep our hand, and as soon as we drop our arm, it's going to take our hand with it. You'll notice my wrist is past horizon when I'm lifting it up, but it's very relaxed and it's not to the extreme, so no harm, no foul. Your arm can also help with faster rolls or diddles, but we're going to talk about that in a different video. Arms are very important. Don't lock your arms in place. Alright, my favorite thing to talk about is sound quality. Almost all of our sound quality comes from our approach and our hand that we've been talking about. Don't think about manipulating the stick. The stick is your friend and it'll do what you want if you're nice to it. Remember, sound comes from resonance. If our stick can resonate and we let the drum resonate, we're going to have a very clear, full, open sound, even at very soft volumes. Resonance and control come from lack of pressure, but maximum contact. I always try to keep in mind relaxed velocity. That's what's going to give me the best result. Well, if you made it this far, go ahead and give me a like and a subscribe. Please leave a comment if you liked the video, didn't like the video, or if you have any questions about anything for me to dive into in the future. Next video, we're going to talk about stroke types, like upstrokes, downstrokes, full strokes, taps, all those things, and how to use them properly in conjunction with all the stuff we just learned today.